Hi everyone, Blake Hero here, and today I'm coming at you guys with a new video. In this video, I'll be going over my post-Orlando thoughts on the deck as well as a deck profile. I didn't do as hot as I wanted to. I went 4-3, and in my 3 losses, I lost to Malice after losing the die roll every game. I'll get more into my thoughts on the format as I go through some tech choices. But all in all, it was really fun. Shout out to Drew. We built this list together, and I think the list has a lot of good theory in it. And even though I didn't do as well as I would have liked to, I still wanted to share my list. So in this list, I decided to play the full support of the evil heroes. I played all the cards from Supreme Darkness except for the Toxic Bubble and a few others, which I'll get into as I go through the deck profile. What led me to this conclusion was the fact that the YCS Feedsmith deck just has too many pushes, and the fact that you can't stop those pushes with the regular end board through a hand trap like what I was doing in my previous deck profile kind of led me down this path. I beat every YCS Feedsmith opponent. I beat every rogue matchup, even though I lost the die roll, but I lost every Malice matchup because I lost the die roll to that deck every time and didn't see my side deck. So some improvements for in the future is I'm going to look to try to cut down to even more cards and just try to streamline the deck even more. But yeah, we'll just go into the list post Orlando, pretty much card for card what I play, but there's a few changes here and there, but I'll get to those when I get to them. First off, we'll start with the engine, and you can see this is a hefty cards. I played 51 cards for this list. I wanted to cut down as many cards as I possibly could, and this is kind of what I ended on. It has a lot of good theory in it, and I'm very proud of the list, and I'll get into some of the card choices as we go through. So we'll start off with the Vision Hero cards, and here we have the ratio of 3, 2, and 1. I've gone into why you play 1 increase in my previous deck profile. This still stands. What makes 1 increase even better now in the high count list, because I'm playing 51 cards, is the fact that you're less likely to draw it now. When you draw it, basically the main thing that happens is that it makes Ferris, you have 1 less push. Kind of the whole point of this list is to have 2 pushes and then a punish, because the YCS Feedsmith deck is doing the math, so where they draw 2 starters 80% of the time. So that was kind of the idea behind this list, and that will become more apparent as we get through the card choices. But really the main thing to note is the 1 increase, but most of this is pretty standard. Next up, for the Evil Hero cards, I'm playing 3 copies of Evil Hero Dusted Gold, 1 Dead End Prison, 1 Sinister Necrom, and 1 Infernal Rider. If you see some of the comments in my other video, I'm really not a big fan of Infernal Rider, and that still reigns true. I really don't like this card, and I really don't like the full package, but I think right now we really don't have that much of a choice, and I think that we have to play this card just because of how much power the YCS Feedsmith deck actually has going second. I think one of the biggest benefits of this deck is the fact that when you go first, this deck is very, very well positioned to win that match against tier 1. And I think that's where the strength lies in this deck, which is why I want to cut down on some cards and kind of sacrifice some going second options, because most likely we're not beating that deck going second just because the direction of the deck is going right now, which if you enjoy that kind of thing, of getting to go first and setting up a crazy board through multiple hand traps, then this might be the deck for you. If not, I can also understand not enjoying that direction of the deck, which is why I really like the direction of my last deck profile more. But realistically, it just didn't have the power. So whenever you play against YCS Feedsmith, they're gonna generally have 3 pushes, and you really need to stop those pushes. And what the deck was doing before in the small engine count list was that it was ending on favorite contact and DPE pretty much every game through hand traps, and that just wasn't enough. That led me to wanting to play the Evil Hero cards, as in the Necrom and the Infernal Rider, and you'll see more options later, just because it has the added power to stop your opponent, because removal is very good right now. So yeah, so just wanted to play this package. I think this ratio is really important. I'll go into more why adjusted ratios in another video, but basically I'm maxing out on them because I really want to see this card every game because it is so strong. Also, it's a hero name, so I really prefer max out on this over Evil Assault in builds like this. And in a future video, I'll explain completely the adjusted gold ratios for you, so you have basically a nice guide. But yeah, all these cards are good. Necrom's a decent pair with Ferris because it's like an extra copy of Mali, because if you pitch Necrom, you can summon Dead End and dump Mali. And those kind of hands help playing through hand traps more. So yeah, this ratio is great. I think if you play the high engine count list, I really recommend playing this ratio of evil heroes. Next up, we're playing the Destiny heroes. There's nothing really to talk here. It's just the very standard. Plasma could be cut because he's EXT food. And if you just summon Plasma, he's just going to get negated by EXT, and then you really can't win from there. The deck has too many pushes after that. So that's just kind of one of the things you might be able to cut Plasma, but I'm still playing it in this list for Rogue and also for an extra name to be able to dump off of Fusion Destiny. You could also, one of the benefits of the Infernal Rider is the fact that he also fills that role, which is why you might be able to cut him. But for now, I'm still playing the Plasma. And then finally, the Elemental Heroes, we're playing just the 4 here. Yeah, not really much to say here. Stratos, if you're going to go to full combo, you can get to it. And then Shadow Mist could also be that other Elemental Hero monster, so you can get into Infernal Rage. Getting to Favorite Contact is really, really important because it combos with Super Poly, which I'm playing. So, yep, this is a pretty standard ratio now post support, because you really don't need more of this card. Once you normal summon this card, it's really hard after that to push through hand traps. So I really like to hold my normal summon for as long as possible. And really what you're using him to get to is a Dusted Gold. So kind of can be redundant, but you can also get to Ferris some hands. It's really subjective, but I think 2 Stratos is perfect right now. Then next for the engine spells, now we have power spells. So in this version, you have the 3 heroes and 3 Fusion Destiny, but also an additional power spell when you play the full support is Evil Assault. Definitely becomes a power spell. Now, you really want to see these cards as often as possible, which is why I'm not playing 60. We actually explored pretty much every number of card count from the 40 all the way up to the 60, and I settled on the 51. I wanted to cut a few cards, and I will probably in the future, but I wanted to show a list that's actually at least the closest I possibly could get to the list in Orlando with a couple changes. So any of these cards, you want to see these cards opening hand all the time. Fusion Destiny got a lot worse now, actually, because of Yugioh EXT. That's going to be a recurring theme. That card kind of completely destroys our deck. Yugioh EXT will dump the Aggregator, which will negate the Plasma, meaning this Fusion Destiny punish through hand traps is now a lot worse, which is why I'm liking Evil Assault a lot more, and one of the reasons why I'm playing all of these support. So that is the power spells, and next we're going to get to the engine requirements. So we have the 1 Mass Change, the 1 Miracle, the 1 Poly, the 1 Dark Fusion, the 1 Super Poly, the 1 Dark Supremacy, and the 1 Favorite Contact. Now, one of the big things you're going to notice is missing is Dark Contact. So through testing, I actually found that every line that Dark Contact came up, Dark Fusion could be in its place. You need Dark Fusion for a lot more things because Infernal Rider specifically adds Dark Fusion, and you just don't need Dark Contact at all. It's a really good option for going second, but I don't think this deck is really going to be able to shine going second anyway, just because of the nature of the format. I think this deck's strength relies in winning the die roll against the tier 1 decks, and if you don't do that, you probably won't win, unfortunately. But it is what it is, and that's where the deck fits into the meta. So this is pretty standard. All of this has been standard for a good bit. So the Dark Fusion, all the lines work with it without Dark Contact. You really only need the Dark Fusion, and you don't really need the Dark Contact, I found. So any cards that I could cut, I decided to. So yeah. So Super Poly, that is a card that I definitely talked very poorly about, and I still think so. I drew this card almost every game in Orlando, and it is a very, very bad brick. So Infernal Rider, who sets Super Poly, actually if you draw Super Poly, you can't even use the Rider, obviously, to set it from the deck, which means the Super Poly is completely dead on summoning the Neos Lord. So it's a really, really bad brick, but I think you have to play it, like I said, because removal is so important, as well as getting to 3 interactions. A lot of the times, you can actually, this will be my end board, which will be 3 set cards. It's really interesting because it's really difficult for the Yugioh deck to actually interact with these cards because they can't just go EXT to dump the Aggregator to negate one of our interruptions. We always get to play with our interruptions whenever we want to because it's really difficult for that deck to interact with back row. So you need to play both of these because the Evil Hero line gets through both of them just because that's how the Evil Hero line works. And I don't really think you can cut either of these. I really wanted my going first to be as strong as possible because that is the benefit of the deck post support. When you play it that way, a lot of times, even through 2 hand traps, you can still end on all 3 back row, which means you can win that game. Beforehand, what would happen is that you would not have these cards and you'd end on Favorite Contact plus Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, which this just wasn't enough against Yugioh Fiendsmith. that deck just had too much gas, especially going second, because this is what you're going to end on through hand traps. This board is actually perfectly good enough because Darklaw turns off EXT because EXT dumps for cost. So now, because that happens, if you can get to the full board, you can win that game no matter what. The problem is the fact that YCS Orlando plays so many hand traps means you're never, ever, ever going to get to Darklaw. I have played a lot of games against that deck just practicing, and I've summoned Darklaw maybe 3 to 4 times out of like probably 50 matches. They just play so much non-engine that you never get to summon this, that it makes it so that it's really difficult if you end on this to actually convert that into wins. So that's where the benefit of playing the full support comes in, because this actually does beat the YCS Fiendsmith deck very, very consistently, because you have 3 forms of interaction, even through hand traps. So that was the main benefit of playing the full support and why I really wanted to do that for this event. It was really good, and I think I had an 80% win rate going first. The problem is that in my last 5 rounds out of 7, I lost the dice roll. I think this deck actually does have some very nice power, especially because of the added benefit of Evil Assault, that you're actually able to go second against the rogue decks, because I went second a lot of times against those rogue decks, and I was still able to push through their boards just based on the amount of gas that the full package provides. But going first, I still think we're 100% reliant on winning the die roll, and I think because of the limited number of non-engine slots in this deck, that's just kind of how the deck has to be built as a going first powerhouse. So that is the engine. There is a lot of engine in this deck just because of the nature of the support. I really don't like the direction of the deck if you play it this way. I really, like I said, much prefer the lower count omni hero deck, which I will showcase an updated profile for in the future. But for now, I think if you're going to a competitive tournament, you might need to play the full package just because it's the best way to set up enough interruptions to consistently beat the best decks through hand traps. Now that leaves the non-engine, so we'll get into it. There's not a whole lot, and I think that's mostly because of the nature of the full support and how the deck has to be built now. So for going first non-engine, we're playing the 3 Ash and the 1 Call By. This card is really, really, really bad going second, but you really need to play it going first just because of the fact that we are a going first powerhouse deck. The main floodgate hand trap that's in the format in the main deck is going to be the Fugalos. So this being able to let you have 4 answers, even though it's in 51, you don't have the best odds of seeing an answer, but you still have an answer nonetheless, because you need to stop that card when you go first. That is one of the few cards going first that can actually prevent us from going combo. This deck plays through 2 low impact hand traps like it's nothing. It's really impressive how the full support allows you to gas through hand traps so well. But yeah, that's why I think these cards are so important, is because we are a going first deck. Now for going second non-engine, I'm playing 3 Fugalos. These will have to be edited in. I actually got rid of them after the event. Then we're gonna play the 3 Droll and Lockbird and the 3 Droplet. These are the only non-engine going second that I found to be a high quality going second card to give us a chance. Fugalos, of course, can completely sway a game. Yes, you will be playing the mini game against these cards, and they have a higher chance of winning it because they will probably be playing a lower count list. But you have to play that mini game because of how high impact these cards are. Same with Droll. Droll is really good against the Mitsuguri YCS deck, which was very popular in the room. It's also really good against YCS just in general. It could lower their ceiling enough to where you have a chance to play through their board, and it's one of the only high impact cards that you can play going second. And Droplet is by far the best one besides Fuga, but it requires you to play the mini game. Droplet can actually answer the board of YCS Fiendsmith, and even with the detonator with a Twins of the Eclipse underneath, which is what made some of the non-engine like Book of Eclipse and Imperm so much weaker. This is one of the only cards that outs it, and one of the reasons why I'm going to try to get down onto a lower card count. It's one of the only outs we have, the Dweller and the detonator with the Twins. Like I said, it can also hit whatever they revive off of the Malice trap. It's just the best non-engine for us, and it's been that way for a long time. So yeah, so some of the closing thoughts I have on the main deck is the fact that just the number of cards that are in this deck. Now, it's a 51 card deck, and that's a lot. And a lot of people say that the best mathematical probability to open a good ratio of non-engine, not seeing your bricks, and seeing just any starter is to play 45 cards plus. I, of course, did that for this event. Some of my thoughts about that is the fact that the number of cards in your deck is public knowledge. We had many games this weekend where we were playing against the yugioh variants, and our opponents simply asked us the question, how many cards are in your deck? And what they would do is they would summon Dweller blind. Because we're playing a higher count list, it's a very good chance that Dweller is really good against us, and of course it is. So that was one of the problems with playing a higher count. I'm really gonna try to theory craft a list that plays the high engine count with the rider and the super poly, etc., but still maintain that lower card count. Of course, you will draw your engine requirements like the rider, like these, more often, but I think that weakness is just something we're gonna have to get over as a deck. When you build a deck in a different way, like you're trying to draw too many non-engine, it's just not playing to the strengths of the deck, sadly. I really like the way that list plays, but it just isn't the format for it. And the deck really isn't well positioned. Because of the fact that we lose to the 3 Fuwalos, and then also post side Lancia and the Drolls, we lose to the 3 low impact hand traps. We can potentially lose to Nib. We can lose to, there's so many cards like this that are in the format that makes it really difficult for this deck to be able to perform, which is why I think it's so important to win game 1. And winning game 1 against a tier 1 deck, you really need to win that dice roll. So that's kind of where I think we sit in the format right now. It's really not a great place, sadly, but it is what it is, and it's just kind of what happens whenever the power level of format gets a little bit too high like it is post Supreme Darkness. So next for the extra deck, I'm playing the 1 Shiny Neos Wingman. Shout out to Justin for giving me this misprint. That was very nice of him. So we're playing the 1 Neos Wingman, the 1 Flame Wingman Infernal Rage, the 1 Sunrise, the 1 Wake Up. Now I cut the second Wake Up from this list because we really don't need it anymore, especially because remaining Dark Supremacy, we can put this card back for our turn 3, and the extra deck got a lot tighter. So yeah, this is going to be pretty standard for any deck that's going to be playing the high engine count list. Next up for the Evil Heroes, we're actually playing 2 Evil Hero Neos Lord, 1 Infernal Wing Backfire, and 1 of the Evil Hero Darkest Night. So now, because these are new, I'll kind of go into them a little bit in depth. Why 2 Neos Lord, you're probably asking? Well, there's a lot of times whenever they cut you off of polymerization access, what your end board is going to be is you're going to have a Neos Lord and a Super Poly set with Dark Supremacy in hand as your discard, and that's because you're going to need to summon a Neos Lord so that you can Super Poly into another one. That makes it really good into the yugioh EXT, which is one of the biggest problems of the deck. Whenever they go EXT to dump, you can let that resolve, and you still have 2 forms of interruption using the Neos Lord and the Super Poly, using one of their monsters as material with Super Poly, and Neos Lord can take the other, so you still have 2 forms of interaction. So the 2 Neos Lord basically is needed for when polymerization access is cut off, which will be a lot of the time if they're playing multiple hand traps. So 2 Neos Lord is absolutely mandatory. Backfire is for the combos. You go into Backfire a lot of times to get access to the trap, and that's basically what she's there for. And sometimes you can use her effect. I use her effect to deal damage a few times, especially combo with the Darkest Night. So now I'm playing Darkest Night because he's the easiest to summon and he deals a lot of damage. He's one of the best going second options. He's very generic, and I think he's a very solid card. He also can float back into Stratos or anything when you're going first. He's just a really solid card, and I found him easier to summon than Evil Hero Malicious Bane, which I think is the other option in this slot. I think you pick between those 2, and I personally like Darkest Night, but I don't think Bane is inherently wrong. Then we have the last of the fusion monsters. We have the 1 Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer and the 1 Dark Law. I'm really just going for the 1 Dark Law line a lot of the times because sometimes you don't even get to the 1 Dark Law just because based on the format. And then the 1 DPE is here for, of course, as our boss monster. A lot of games through hand traps, you also might end on, this is going to be a very common end board, is the DPE with the 3 sets. And this is a very, very hard board for decks to break. Even if they go EXT to dump, you can still chain the DPE to kill their 1 card, and then you still have 3 forms of interaction after that. It's still a very, very solid end board, and even without Dark Law, that you almost maybe don't even need it, and that's something I'm going to explore in the future, is cutting mass change completely for right now. We'll see how that goes, but that's just some interesting theory that you can maybe play around with, because if you can't get to it, why even play it? And you can cut lower cards, because DPE plus the 3 set is definitely good enough to win like every game if you get to it. Finally, for the links, 2 Cross, 1 Wonder, 1 Infernal, 1 Dread. 2 Cross is still needed because if you don't get to the trap, you still need it for the follow-up. These are very standard, and 1 Wonder Driver instead of 2 is because in the high engine count list, it's not mandatory to play 2 because you're not going to be going for the line of converting the Evil Hero monsters back into the Omni line, because you're just going to be fusing with them with Dark Fusion, etc., and using the Evil Hero cards in their intended way instead of the way that I prefer. So you really only need 1 for this kind of approach. For the low engine count list, you definitely need to play 2, but for this kind of list, you really only need 1. And then for the side deck that I'm liking, I didn't make any changes here. I'm playing the 3 Lancia. This is just the best card against Malice, and that was all my losses. I didn't see that, and I didn't see this either. I played both of these because I really wanted a like floodgate instead of the new Mulch Army, which let them play and could be ashed. I wanted a card that just said that they can't play. It has some inherent synergies with the deck because it's a fiend monster. It also is a monster that summons itself, which I found to be really, really powerful because of the Neos Lord summoning requirements, which is an effect monster on the field. Being able to have a monster on the field when you start your turn is actually really, really good now, because Neos Lord, especially summoned with Dark Fusion, is like a very insane push because they can't target it. So I like the monsters that summon itself. Yes, you might be thinking to yourself, it has conflicts with the Hero Lives. Sure, but I'd much rather than not be able to play than my Hero Lives get turned off. Next, I'm playing, it's gonna look like a weird ratio, but 1 Nibiru, 1 Valor, and 1 Imperm. This is because you can probably guess with the 1-ofs what card is coming next, and that's based on the problem that I was talking about before. But these are 3 low impact hand traps that can sometimes be a little annoying, and they're also really good going second. You can side in a good amount of the time. So we'll just get into that card next. We'll get into the 3 Crossout Designator. The main reason to play this is because, like I was showing earlier, we lose to the Lancias, we can lose to the Nib, we can also sometimes lose to Ash, we can lose to Fua. There's so many of these high impact non-engine and even low impact non-engine where Crossout Designator hits both of those when you build your deck this way. I think this card is absolutely mandatory in Hero right now, because we're gonna try, like I was saying earlier, to play the deck strength, which is the going first power, and the main things that stop that going first power are going to be these floodgate hand traps. Now, the concept I was talking about earlier, which are the fact that our deck plays through these low impact non-engine so well, but what happens there is they have to use multiples of those to stop us. It just basic card economy, if your opponent has even one of these, that completely stops us. These 1 card floodgate hand traps basically equal 2 to 3 low impact hand traps against us, which is why I think Crossout is absolutely mandatory right now in the deck. And I don't think you can main it because the card really sucks going second. I don't necessarily want non-engine that completely sucks going second, as this has basically no applications going second, but it's really good going first, especially when you tailor your deck to it, which is what I've done here. I think if you play the low count list, I don't think you can fit this just based on the way that we're building the deck. You don't have the space, but I liked it, and every time I drew it, I won because I was able to hit one of the high impact hand traps. And other than that, you just don't have an out, which kind of sucks. And then finally, I'm playing 3 Book of Eclipse. This card is really not good anymore in the main deck because of the Twins of the Eclipse. If you go Book of Eclipse, they're going to chain Detonator, destroying itself. Let's just summon it back. It trades with Caesar, but that just wasn't good enough for me to justify in the main deck. It's also not good into Malice, but I still wanted an extra out to Detonator post side, so that's why I elected to play the Book of Eclipse in the side deck, because I bring these in that matchup. Now, some of the basic siding pattern. When you go second, the main things that I like to take out is the 1 call by, and these 4 generally for some more non-engine. That's still not a lot of non-engine going second, which is sad, but these cards aren't really good going second. So that's one of the tips that I'll give, is that you can take these cards out, but you really need them for going first. So that's why they're in the main deck. And yeah, all in all, I think the list was pretty solid. There's some things I'm going to change. Like I want to try to get on the lower card count and try to see if I can solve some of the problems with going second. I think there's really a really big dip in card quality after the Droplet, the Droll, and the Fua. So maybe there's going to be some cards cut to where we can get closer to 40, but still playing the high impact engine. I really prefer the first list that I posted, but I just don't think it's good enough right now, sadly. It's one of those give and takes where if you, sure, the other list that I posted is more consistent, but it's consistently not strong enough to beat the best deck in the format, which is extremely highly represented. So yeah, I mean, that was my deck list. It's pretty close to what I played in Orlando. I just changed a few things. It was a great event. It was very fun. I really enjoyed seeing people. I really appreciate a lot of people introducing themselves to me. It was a great time. I just think the deck's really in a not great position, and we basically have to play the nuclear option of extremely going first and winning some die rolls, which I just didn't do. So yeah, I appreciate you guys for watching. I have plenty of content lined up, and yeah, so stay tuned for future content. Peace.